We may want to know the results of the election on Tuesday night, but there is absolutely no law or rule that we have to.
It would be very, very proper and very nice if a winner were declared on November 3rd instead of counting ballots for 2 weeks, which is totally inappropriate, and I don't believe that that's by our laws. I don't believe that. So we'll
Believe it. In fact, the only reason we're accustomed to hearing results on election night is that news organizations call races based on unofficial results. This year, even those calculations are going to take some time.
Well, the unofficial results that we get on election night, they are based on the ballots that have been counted so far, typically coming in from in-person voting.
Wendy Weiser with the Brennan Center points out in-person voting is going to be down this year, while voting by mail is way up. Those votes take longer to process and count.
This year, it might very well be the case that in many states, we don't even know who the winners are on election night or for days after election day.
Consider this. More than 85 million people have already cast a ballot, but there are still legal questions about how some states will tally the final count, how the media will call the winner, and whether the outcome will be embraced peacefully by everyone. From NPR, I'm Audie Cornish. It's Friday, October 30th.
On the next episode of Louder Than a Riot, how a law meant to control the mob changed the mixtape game forever.
Gangsta Grills is the biggest thing arguably ever in the mixtape's history. Don't tell me that what we're doing is wrong.
Listen now to Louder Than a Riot, the podcast from NPR Music.
It's Consider This from NPR.
And we have our first projections of the night. Take a look at this. Donald Trump, we project...
If you're watching TV Tuesday night, you'll hear the familiar sound of news anchors calling states for one candidate or the other.
We project that Hillary Clinton is the winner in Vermont.
When a news organization makes these calls,
and look at all these wins we're projecting for Hillary Clinton right now.
They're doing it with only a portion of the official vote in.
By more than 131,000 votes, a big win for Donald Trump in Florida.
To make a projection like that, they take actual voting results, plug them into a calculation that also uses survey and exit poll data, turnout projections, data from past elections, and other metrics. And then once polls have closed and they're confident in what a final result is projected to be, they declare a winner.
And in some states, we're able to do so early in the vote count because it's not possible for a trailing candidate to catch up. And in others, we have to wait.
David Scott is deputy managing editor at the Associated Press. They're one of the most reputable news organizations out there when it comes to calling election results. In fact, NPR relies on the AP in our own coverage. We don't declare a winner until they do. But in the presidential race, that doesn't always happen on election night.
So in the last 7 elections, we've been able to call a winner on election night or by midnight on the East Coast 4 times. The earliest was in 1996.
The voting is just about over in 12 more states. Their polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
At 9 p.m. when Bill Clinton won re-election over Bob Dole.
And we are going to make some projections.
That was about the time other news organizations were able to call the race too.
270 needed to win. ABC News now projects that Mr. Clinton will be re-elected as of now, at this point, 9 o'clock Eastern Time.
A call by 9 p.m. Eastern Time this year does not seem likely. And again, in 3 of the last 7 elections, a winner wasn't declared by the AP before midnight. Bottom line, there's no reason we should expect to know who won that night.
Just because we don't know by the time we go to bed or by the time the late local news is on, doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's not a sign of fraud or malfeasance. It's probably an unfair expectation that we would always know on election day before the pandemic, and I think it's certainly an unfair expectation now, especially with just this huge boom of advance votes. It's just democracy at work.
So counting votes could take some time. But in a few key states, there have been lawsuits about whether or not some votes should be counted at all. And this week, 2 of those made it all the way to the Supreme Court. One case from Pennsylvania and the other from North Carolina. Now, the cases were a little different, but they both had to do with ballot deadlines. The question is, how long after Election Day can states take to count mail-in ballots that have been postmarked by Election Day?
The Supreme Court has been reasonably consistent about deferring to state lawmakers and policymakers on these questions.
Ben Ginsberg is a longtime election lawyer. He was part of the legal team for President George W. Bush in the 2000 election. He spoke to NPR's Mary Louise Kelly about what the Supreme Court's two rulings mean for Election Day and the days after.
The practical consequences of the rulings will be that ballots that are postmarked on Election Day can still be counted if they're received within 3 days of the election in Pennsylvania and 9 days in North Carolina. So theoretically, there will be more ballots counted. Part of what's important in the Supreme Court decisions is that if you start changing deadlines, voters are likely to be confused because they've relied on what they believe the deadlines to be.
You were one of the lawyers on the Bush legal team in the last contested presidential election in 2000, which of course was ultimately decided by the Supreme Court. How do you rate the chances we might end up in the same place in this election?
At 5.2%.
5.2, okay.
There have been 57 presidential elections in our history. 3 of them have gone to either a contested election or a recount. So there's a 5.2% chance.
Okay. However, we do find ourselves in the moment that we're in 2020. It's not just about statistics. I mean, what do you think on the chances that we will have an uncontested election result at some point in the days after November 3rd?